Welcome to the Great Compromise podcast. I'm Victoria the Democrat, and with me as always is...
Jim the Republican.
And today we're going to be talking about the post office. So the format for today's episode will, as always, consist of each of us outlining our points and then moving into the debate portion of our episode. I will be beginning because I'm on the pro side today.
Our topic today is the post office. So why are we talking about the post office? Well, every now and then the discussion comes up with one side saying we should keep it a public service and the other side saying it should be privatized. President Trump, a few years back, brought this topic back up, and though it hasn't been discussed in a little while, we still thought it would be interesting to talk about today. So let's get into it.
Today, I'm on the pro side. I am for the United States postal system. For many years, it was the nation's largest employer of black workers. Today, it is 37% minority and 37% female. Threatening the USPS is a threat to our $1.6 trillion mailing industry, which employs 7.3 million people. The Postal Service cannot file for bankruptcy. The USPS is not a private corporation like FedEx, and even if FedEx and USPS and Walmart work together, they could not replace the United States Postal Service. Your mailman comes every day to pick up and drop off your mail. It's a great service. It's accessible and obligated to serve everyone. UPS and FedEx don't go places that aren't profitable. The ability to get your mail should not be a function of your income or where it is you can afford to live. Lastly, the United States Postal Service is a public good that cannot be comparably replaced. The post office has provided many with a steady job and a good pension, allowing many to provide for themselves and others. Historically, working for the post office has provided an avenue towards middle-class life, especially for those who have recently immigrated to the United States.
Thank you, Victoria. And I'm on the con side. I think the post office should be privatized. Now let's be real. The post office is in trouble. And that's not even a controversial statement. According to the post office's own numbers, the popularity of the internet has caused consumer demand for first-class mail to plummet by 47% since 2001. Even an increase in revenue from package deliveries hasn't been enough to prevent heavy losses. The organization has lost nearly $78 billion since 2007. Employee compensation takes up most of the revenue each year, but the real issue comes from the generous retirement package that is underfunded by $120 billion. Or what about the tens of thousands of properties leased or owned by the Postal Service, many of which receive little to no foot traffic? In fact, 4 out of 5 post offices are operating at a loss. And that's a bigger problem when you learn that the USPS cannot close a post office, quote, solely for operating at a deficit. It's just not allowed. An expensive bailout would only be a band-aid on this problem. We know for a fact that the private sector is more than capable of package delivery in this country. It's time to leave it up to them completely. For my second point, privatization has already worked in other countries. Most European countries now have a more entrepreneurial postal industry than we do. In fact, the U.S. ranks near the bottom of the Consumer Postal Council's 26-country Index of Postal Freedom. Here's the list of countries that have already successfully privatized or partly privatized their postal services: Sweden, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Germany, and Britain. Experience has shown that both privatization and open competition create efficiency. It really works. Competition is king. Let's allow the mail industry in this country to finally have some.
Thank you, Jim. So in your research about the Postal Service and all of their debt, did you read about the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act?
I did not.
So that act was passed in 2006, and it mandated that the Postal Service had to pre-fund their retirees' benefits, which results in an annual payment of roughly $5.5 billion that they have to make every year for 10 years. So since 2006, that's been a huge, really all of the debt that they've been drowning in. Because if we exclude those debt payments required in the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act, then they have finished each year with revenue surpluses for most of the past decade.
Well, I'm not really sure why that's the issue, because it kind of proves my point that it being a government institution that can mandate these things, it's causing it to go into this huge amount of debt. If it were a private company, that wouldn't happen.
Or we make a change in our Congress to this act that was passed in 2006 to take some burden off of the Postal Service instead of scrapping the entire thing.
Well, that would be for benefits. Is that pension? What is it? What does that money go to?
It's pre-funding retirees' health benefits.
Okay, so we can't actually take that away once that's been passed.
The requirement to pre-fund for retirees? Can't they just pay for the retirees they currently are funding?
Yes, I mean the fact that the U.S. government promised these people that we would pay for their pensions or their benefits after retirement, and then taking that away is something very scummy that I don't think we should do.
I'm not suggesting changing the benefits that people get in their pensions. This act, from my understanding, is saving money for the future pensions that they have to pay on, not the current ones. They're pre-funding. So that's why it's a $5.5 billion payment they have to make every year. It's because they're creating like a savings account for the future.
Okay. Well, again, my argument is that if this was a private company, that wouldn't have even happened in the first place. You can't spend money you don't have in a private company. That's something that's uniquely the government. So, sure, maybe Congress could fix it, but they're in a lot of debt at this point, and it's costing us a lot of money. It's not really worth fixing when we could switch it to a private organization.
I like your point about how they cannot close postal service centers just because of the drain it is on their budget. I think that is a great way for them to save some money, is no longer using these ornate buildings in the center of cities just to distribute mail and sort.
Well, as long as it's a public service, those buildings are an important part of that service, right? We can't sell those or stop leasing those as long as the USPS is a public service. So if it was a private company, we could do that. So I'm glad you agree with that idea.
Why can we not? Can't we just change the rule?
Can we change the rule?
Yeah. What's wrong with changing the rule so that they can close locations that are no longer working for them?
Well, that would argue against your own point, which was that the Postal Service helps people across the country, even in rural areas, and these private businesses wouldn't be able to reach them. So if you're closing these rural offices, you're hurting...
No, it's not the rural offices that are ornate.
Not necessarily ornate, but even the small offices don't get much foot traffic. 4 out of 5 of these post offices are in debt.
It's the rural offices that are most important because those are not going to be... there's not going to be any financial incentive for FedEx and UPS to go out to the sticks of any state. We have so much in our country that is just small rural towns. Those are the ones that depend most on the post office, not big cities.
Yes, but those are also the ones that are in debt because they don't have enough people visiting them. Are they necessary for the 3 people that go and visit them? Yes. Are they making any money there? No. So by your own argument, we'd have to close those down.
That's not my argument, is that we could leave ornate buildings in the cities that are causing a lot to keep open and keep running. It's the rural ones that are really important because maybe they're not going to the post office location daily, but they're still being delivered from postal workers that work there. So their mail trucks are going to those rural areas every day. And that's part of the accessibility that we need in our postal service.
You're talking about ornate buildings. I can't speak for ornate. What we're talking about is whether or not these buildings, these offices are in debt or not because they get enough foot traffic. right? And you yourself said it wouldn't be profitable for FedEx or UPS to go to these rural areas. So if it's not profitable for them, it's certainly not profitable for the Postal Service right now to be at those locations. So the rural ones are an issue.
But that is where the money spent in city locations could be distributed to rural locations so that those are the ones getting the funding because that's where it's most needed. That's my point.
Okay. I see what you're saying. I don't think it would be enough to save those rural places. I actually would argue that if we privatize it, it would be profitable for private businesses to go into these places because, I mean, there's buyers. If you're buying a package from rural Alaska and you need it delivered, someone is going to want to take that money and deliver it to you.
Well, many people rely on the U.S. Postal Service to receive life-saving medications, and with lockdown and shutdowns that we've had during the pandemic, the mail's been more important than ever. So if it's not financially helpful for FedEx and UPS to be going to those locations, then who will? That's exactly why we need the Postal Service.
Well, I guess this is the argument that private businesses are already delivering to rural locations. You get Amazon packages anywhere you want these days. So I guess we don't really know, but I would argue that the private businesses would pick up that slack. It would make more sense for them to deliver these individual packages than having an office in these locations that get 2 people a week.
I guess we would have to try it and find out, but the post office does have an approval rating of 90%, making it the most popular federal institution.
Popular doesn't mean profitable. And that's all I'm arguing. It's not profitable.
All right, but what about the fallout for privatizing our postal system? It would be less reliable if we privatized because 14.5 million Americans don't have access to the internet, 59 million Americans still pay their bills by mail, and over 170 million get their medication delivered by mail.
Well, the beauty of capitalism is that businesses always pick up where others leave behind. If there is any sort of profit to be made, there will be a company that will do it. So maybe it'll be FedEx, maybe it'll be UPS, maybe a new company or a bunch of companies, because the Postal Service is so big, will pick up the slack where Postal Service left off, or if we just privatize that by itself, we won't have a problem. In fact, I think that is the answer to a few of your other arguments about, who are they going to hire? Are they going to hire women and minorities? Well, these people, let's say the post office goes under. These other delivery businesses are going to need employees to pick up for the slack of the post office going under. And so they'll hire these people who are already experienced and now are out of work. So that'll work out nicely. Road to middle class, I would argue that package delivery companies right now already are giving good middle class jobs, and so that wouldn't be an issue. And they would deliver everywhere it's profitable in this country. So if you order a package anywhere and it's not in remote Alaska, it'll probably be delivered to you. So that would be my argument. It's that competition and the free market will make up for it, as it always does.
If you're not living in remote Alaska,
sorry to remote
okay.
Alaska. Well, they knew
what
they
gonna do.
They knew what they were getting into. It's just them and some bears.
I think that people in severely remote locations still rely on receiving their medications by mail and paying their bills, right? Mm-hmm. And those are the people that need it the most because they have probably terrible internet access and bad phone quality. So are they just going to fall through the cracks if we get rid of our postal service?
No, that's not going to change. Like I said, the free market will make up for where the post office left behind.
Well, I guess we would have to trust that people will create and fill those spots, but in the meantime, wouldn't people be falling through the cracks? That's not going to be an immediate process because Walmart, FedEx, and UPS together couldn't manage what the Postal Service does.
Well, I guess it depends on the plan. So One plan would be to completely dissolve the post office and let the free market fend for itself, and that would be, a nightmare. You're right, things would fall through the cracks. Another argument would be we just privatize the current post office, make that its own privately run business, and it keeps the work it has right now. It just needs to make a profit to survive. And of course, there's the hybrid model, which a few European countries are doing, but...
How would we make the Postal Service private? What would that look like?
Well, and I don't say this very often, but we could follow Europe's lead. They already have a couple of countries who have privatized or partially privatized their postal services. Like Sweden. They deliver mail to more than half their nation's households every third day. And interestingly, Sweden has not had any post offices at all since 2002, since postal retail sales have moved to other businesses, such as grocery stores. And in Germany, their postal service has few standalone branches now, having sold almost all of its 29,000 buildings. Most branches are in other businesses. So that's the hybrid method, but privatizing it here could look something similar, and it's already worked.
Interesting points. I would like to learn more about what the hybrid system looks like in other countries, but maybe it could work here.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode of The Great Compromise. If you liked it, find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and we'll see you next week with another new episode.